Hello, friends. Welcome back to The Real Dish. I'm your host, Mareya, and today I want to ask you a question. If your life was a book, what chapter would you be in right now? Maybe you're in the chapter where the kids have left home and suddenly the house is so quiet you can hear yourself think again. Maybe you're navigating menopause and wondering who this woman is looking back at you in the mirror. I can relate to that. Maybe you're rebuilding after a divorce, or maybe you're caring for aging parents while trying not to lose yourself in the process. Maybe your career no longer excites you. Maybe you've retired. Or maybe, and this is the trickiest one of all, everything looks pretty good on paper, but something inside keeps whispering, there's got to be more than this. And if you've ever had that feeling, today's episode is really for you. Because I don't think you're having a midlife crisis. I think you're standing at the beginning of your second chapter. It's the precipice, and it's waiting for you to say, I'm going to move. And I want to tell you something. I wish someone had told me years ago. Nobody, I mean nobody else gets to write this for you. You do. And I know personally, I've been thinking a lot about chapters lately. And not just because my daughter is getting married and beginning a brand new season of her own life. And not just because my husband and I sold the home where, we bought our dream home, we got married, we moved in. It was like a new beginning for all of us. It was the mark of we call it the end of a drought, so to speak. There's a lot of emotion that was packed into that. No, not because of that. Not because we made the decision to do that and start traveling more. Not because I finally made the decision to begin HRT, literally after years of trying to my way through menopause. Although all of those things matter and certainly have been instigators of these thoughts. I've been thinking about chapters because for the first time in a really long time, I feel like I'm holding the pen again. And that realization stopped me in my tracks. For years, if I'm honest, I think I let life do the writing. I didn't feel like I was in control. And gradually, one responsibility at a time, one deadline, one school pickup, one television show, one cookbook, one business, one launch, one family obligation, one more person needing something from me. Before I knew it, I had become really successful at managing everyone else's story. But somewhere in there, I stopped asking myself what story I actually wanted to live. Whose story was I living? Was I living the picture of success for someone else? Having a bunch of handbags in a closet does not success make me. I didn't need that other person's story. The story of feeling the need to hold on to a lot of things was really not the story at all. I was really looking for peace. I was really looking for joy. And I was really looking for a content that money cannot buy. Does that resonate? Because I don't think it's just me. I think women are masters at becoming indispensable. And we become the glue and the planner and the caregiver and the chef and the chauffeur and the peacemaker and the one everyone depends on. And while there's so much beauty in that, there's also a little bit of a danger because sometimes we're so busy helping everyone else that we forget our own dreams, our own story to write. So for me, the wake up call was not really all at once. I think it came in whispers, whisper that became louder every year. And it sounded something like this. Is this it? Not because I wasn't grateful. I was deeply. I've always been grateful. I've lived an extraordinary life. I've cooked around the world. I've written books. I've worked in television. I've raised two amazing kids. I built businesses from scratch. None of that is lost on me. But gratitude and longing can exist in the same heart. You can love the life you've built and still feel called to build something new. And it's scary, but I wish more women understood that. Because somewhere along the way, we start believing that wanting more somehow means that we're not grateful enough. And that's simply not true. Growth isn't betrayal, it's biology, it's evolution. Trees grow, rivers move, seasons change. We're the only creatures who expect ourselves to stay exactly the same for decades, if not our whole lives. And so often, that's why we get stuck. We don't change and evolve because in our minds, why do we need to do that? If everything is good, why rock the boat? Why do so many brilliant, capable women stay in lives that they've quietly outgrown? I don't think it's because we're lazy or unmotivated or incapable. I think it's because we're loyal and fear of change can get the best of us. So think about that. How many times have you caught yourself saying things like, I'm just not that adventurous and I'm not athletic or I'm terrible with money. I used to say that all the time. And ladies, we can't be terrible with money. Even if our husbands are in the picture, we need to be just as responsible. I'm too old to start over. I'm the responsible one, you know, and I'm doing the robot move right now. I'm the caregiver. I'm the overweight friend. I wouldn't dare lose the weight. I'm not creative or, any myriad of excuses. Did you notice that those aren't observations? They're actually identities. And identities are incredibly powerful because once you believe something about yourself, your brain starts looking for evidence to prove you're right. And if you've decided you're not the kind of person who travels alone, you'll find 100 reasons not to book the ticket. And if you've decided you're too old to build muscle, every sore joint becomes proof. See, look, I'm too old for this. I'm sore. You're supposed to be sore. If you've decided you're just not good with technology, you'll never launch the business. I hear so many women in midlife saying, "Oh, tech, oh this, oh that." Well, you've got to evolve with the times. You can't just farm all of that out to other people. You got to at least understand it. So, our brains love certainty. Even when certainty is keeping us small, at least it's certain in air quotes. But here's something fascinating about the human brain that I learned when I got my brain health coaching certification. Its primary job isn't to make you happy, it's to keep you alive. And one of the ways it does that is by equating familiar with safe. That's why even positive change can feel terrifying. A new relationship, a new city, a healthier body, a new career, a passport with fresh stamps, my favorite. A business you've dreamed about for years that you've put on the back burner. To your brain, those things aren't exciting, they're unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels risky, which is why so many of us mistake fear for a stop sign when it's often just proof we're growing. And looking back now, I realize every major and minor, really, major though, turning point in my life started with discomfort. Moving from Egypt as a little girl, starting over in America, becoming a single mom, walking onto television sets, competing in a eeny, weeny, teeny bikini in bodybuilding, building and selling a business, remarrying in my 50s, walking into a retreat by myself, starting HRT after years of resisting it. None of those moments felt comfortable. They were all with a lot of uncertainty. But every single one expanded my life, and every single one required me to stop asking, can I do this? And start asking, who might I become if I do? What am I missing if I don't? Because that's the real question. It's not whether you're capable, but it's whether you're willing to meet the version of yourself waiting on the other side of your fear. So, if that's why we stay stuck, what makes midlife different? Why does this season have a way of stirring something deep inside us, even when life looks fine from the outside? And by the way, I'm not telling you to disrupt your fine life and completely go off the deep end. Don't think I'm telling you, "Oh, your life is too good. Now it's time to rock the boat." No, that's not it. But if there is something that you've dreamt of that is stirring in you, it's time to answer the call, because let's just face it for a second. There are probably less years on this side than there were on the other side. Okay? Now, that's the reality. But let me reframe this for you. What if midlife isn't the beginning of the end? What if it's just the plot twist that finally puts you back at the center of your own story? Okay, that is reframing. Rather than focusing on how few years you have, how about we talk about how it's the beginning of a new chapter? And this isn't the end of your story, it's the chapter where everything changes. It's going to change whether you like it or not, because there are going to be things beyond your control. You are aging. We are all aging. And aging is not a four-letter word, it's just a reality. But how you age is the story. You know, your children will have their own lives. You cannot keep them at home forever, even if they want to. You shouldn't. But how are you going to react to that and evolve with it? You know what, I really love movies. And what I love about a great movie is about halfway through, pretty much everything changes. I mean, that is always, there's always a plot twist to a good movie. The main character discovers something they didn't know, they lose something, they gain perspective, they meet someone unexpected, they have to make a choice, you know, sliding door kind of scenario. It's the moment where the audience sits forward in their seat because they realize, oh, this isn't the story I thought I was watching. It's something new. That's the plot twist. And I think midlife gets a really bad rap because we've mistaken that plot twist for the ending or the crisis. We hear words like menopause and empty nest and retirement and gray hair and reading glasses and hormone replacement therapy and adult children and aging parents and career pivots, even divorce and widowhood. And somehow society packages all of that together as decline, as if we're supposed to quietly fade into the background and disappear. But can I just say, who came up with that ridiculous idea? Seriously, because from where I'm sitting, midlife doesn't feel like disappearing or shrinking. It feels like waking up. I remember turning 50 and thinking, well, here we go. Like, this is it. It's all downhill from here. And if I'm honest, I think I carried around some beliefs that weren't even mine. That my best work was behind me, and that opportunities belonged to younger women, and that aging meant becoming less relevant and less visible. But guess what? Here's what happened. I published my first solo book with a major publisher. I got remarried. I sold my business to my mentor from afar. And a myriad of other things. I even invented a new product, Superfood Sprinkle, and I was on Next Level Chef with Gordon Ramsay. This is all in my 50s, after 50. So if you're thinking about the old stories, I want you to know that those stories don't have to be your stories. They can be social media stories, they can be somebody else's, but not yours. You can still have adventure. You can still have success. You can still have the best body you've ever built. I did in my 50s. I did two bodybuilding competitions. I was like, fork this. I'm not going to accept this menopause in my midsection. I'm going to figure out how to get in the best shape of my life. And I went and did that. And you can too. I watch women climb mountains all the time. And I'm not talking literal mountains only. I'm talking about the proverbial mountains, the businesses, the travel, the finding love, the going back to school, the writing books, the competing, the becoming grandmothers. Okay, that is a beautiful era to embrace. All of that because they've decided that they are okay with rewriting. And so maybe that story that we've been handed needs some editing. One of my favorite quotes comes from Carl Jung, who said, "Life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you were just doing research." And I feel that. I really do. I feel like I was just doing the research. I was just sometimes just like surviving, not thriving. In my 30s, when I was a single mom of two and my kids were really young, I was winging it by the seat of my pants. And I don't mind saying that. I did not have not even a fraction of it figured out. And I made a lot of stupid mistakes. But I think that understanding really has served me well now in my 50s because it helped me decide what kind of partner I really wanted, what kind of work I really wanted to do, and how I wanted to live my days, how I wanted to show up for people, how the mom that I really wanted to be. I think that sometimes when you're winging it and you're just flying by the seat of your pants, you're not necessarily stepping up into your full, purpose and power. And I have noticed something interesting since the beginning of this season of reinvention that people often ask me, and they'll say like, I don't have your tenacity or your guts. I'm scared to do all those things. And of course, there's fear, but the fear never disappears. It's just losing its voting rights. And, I don't know about you, but I'm a believer. And in the Bible, it talks about how fear doesn't own us, that fear is actually disbelief because God's really got it in the palm of his hands. It doesn't mean you let go of the steering wheel because he can't steer a parked car, but fear is what will stop you from walking in your honest purpose. And I think that's where I get my confidence from. It's not that I'm writing this book by myself, but that he's writing it with me. And I've seen this over and over again. When I started bodybuilding in my 50s, people thought I was having a midlife crisis, but I wasn't. I was discovering what my body was capable of after I completely tore my ACL and a longitudinal tear in my meniscus and fractured my tibia and decided to opt out of surgery and recover using physical therapy and weight training. And I was blown away, and so was everybody else at what I was able to achieve. When I finally, just a couple months ago, decided to start hormone replacement therapy after years of trying to white knuckle my way through menopause. And some people thought I was giving up, like, hey, you were the one that was saying you were going to do it naturally. Well, I wasn't giving up. I was just choosing to thrive instead of really flailing. And when my husband and I sold our family home, people asked if we were sad. And of course, there was sadness. I mourned that for many, many months. But then I saw the possibility that two things can really be true at once: grief and excitement. And it's okay to embrace those emotions together. You can be fearful and hopeful at the same time. Endings and beginnings can be concurrent. And then, my friend Renee at 74, you've seen me on social media with her. She's traveling the world. She's competing in pageants. She's walking on international bodybuilding stages because she finally gave herself permission after a lower lumbar fusion and years of just accepting aging for what everybody else framed it up to be. So, how many people spend decades waiting for someday? I mean, someday is not a day. It's actually a day that doesn't exist. It's not a date on the calendar. It's a delaying tactic. And if we're not careful, we wake up wondering where all those some days went. I mean, how many days do you look back on and go, I was going to do that that day, but then life got in the way? Life got in the way. I put it on the back burner. I want to ask you something right now. What if the thing you've been calling a crisis was actually an invitation? What if that invitation to slow down and reevaluate your life and to ask some bigger questions and to stop living on autopilot was something that you were required to do because your days were numbered? What if this time of your life was actually a gift of reflection and not just a hurry up and get through it phase? You know, whether it's retirement or your career or your life stage and your place of residence and your career pivot potentially. What all those things, you know? I've always loved to cook, and one thing that every chef knows is that the best dishes aren't built by throwing everything into the pot at once. Okay, they're layered, one ingredient at a time, one decision at a time, one taste, one adjustment, one little improvement after another. And life works the same way. You don't have to reinvent yourself overnight. No one really does. I mean, even if it looks like they did, no. It's an evolution. You don't just show up completely differently. There's a boundary, there's a workout, there's a passport stamp, there's a difficult conversation, there's a courageous yes. There's one ordinary day that you decide, I'm not going to keep living like this. And then the chain reaction starts to happen because your mind has accepted, your brain, that fear thing that stops you from making those steps has accepted your belief system. And you will see life showing up different, a different lens when you accept that that's your new truth and you speak it. So, where do you begin? How do you stop drifting through life and start designing it intentionally? That's exactly what I want to share with you next. Because every beautiful home and unforgettable meal and meaningful life starts with the same thing, it's a strong foundation. I have built something that I am really excited about, and I can't wait to share this with you. It's called the Foundations Framework because you can't build a beautiful second chapter on a shaky foundation. Have you ever noticed this? That nobody builds a house by picking out the throw pillows first? I know that's a little sarcastic, but seriously, nobody walks onto an empty lot and says, I'd like the marble countertops, and can we make the faucet gold? I mean, unless they don't know anything about building. Before there's a beautiful kitchen, there's a front porch where memories are made, and there's a roof, and there's a foundation. And yet, that's exactly what we do with our lives. We decide we want to lose 20 pounds and start a business and travel more and find love and retire and write a book and feel happier and have more confidence and all of those wonderful things. But we skip the foundation and we chase the outcomes instead of building the life that naturally produces them when you make the right decisions. So that's why I created something I call foundations. Not because I think you need another planner, but because I think you need a process. And every meaningful reinvention starts with that same question. What am I building this next chapter on? And it's not just for midlife. It's for every major transition. Whether you're graduating from college or you're thinking about starting a new career or you're thinking about your relationships. Because if your foundation is fear, you'll build a fearful life. And if it's comparison, you'll always feel behind. And if it's perfection, you'll never begin. So today I want to walk you through the same questions I've been asking myself as I've stepped into this next season. Not because I have all the answers, but because Better questions almost always lead to better lives. When you have the right questions in front of you, you can really be honest with what you want. And foundation is an acronym. So F is for find your truth. Not what Instagram says you should be, not what your family expects you to be, but really where you are. And what I think is one of the bravest things we can do is tell ourselves the truth, not the polished version or the honest, you know, or the someone else's version, but the honest version. So, how's your health? How's your marriage? How's your friendships? How's your finances? How's your faith? How's your energy? How's your joy? How's your stress? What are you pretending not to notice? Because here's the thing, you can't navigate from a location you're unwilling to admit you're standing in. GPS doesn't even work that way, and life doesn't either. So let's evaluate that. O is to own your story. That might be my favorite part because so many women spend decades apologizing for their story. Maybe your marriage ended. Mine did. My first one. Maybe your body changed. Mine did. Maybe your career didn't unfold the way you imagined. Mine didn't. Maybe you've made mistakes and welcome to being human. I've done all of these things. But your story isn't something to edit out, it's evidence that you've lived. That is the beautiful thing. When you write your next chapter is you can edit. I used to think that reinvention meant becoming someone completely different, and now I think it really means becoming more honestly yourself. So the credentials, I'm calling those the mistakes, but the credentials and the scars, they're proof that you've survived enough to help someone else, including yourself. So you don't need to erase your story and regret and play back all of the dumb things you did. Own it because nobody can tell it the way you can. And you can use that for your own benefit and someone else's. You is to understand your values. I think this is something people really need to ask themselves more. What matters to you now? Not 20 years ago, but today. Because values, just like everything else, they evolve. When I was younger, success looked like TV and cookbooks and deadlines and saying yes to every opportunity. But today, no. Success looks very different. It looks like health and joy and freedom and wiggle room in my schedule and travel and faith and time with my family, meaningful work, helping women realize they're not done yet. I mean, none of those things are better than my old goals. They're just simply more aligned with the woman I've become. I those are things that I couldn't tell you I needed 20 years ago. So if your life feels out of alignment, like your tires, it may not be because you're doing too little. It may be because you're climbing the wrong mountain. N is name your next chapter. Here's where it gets fun. Imagine your life really is a book. What would the next chapter be called? Think about that. What would it be called? Is it Finally Choosing Me or The Great Adventure or Stronger Than Ever or The Year I Stopped Apologizing? Those are all great titles. Mine was Finding Joy Again. Yes, because little things add up to big joy. It's not just having all the things, it's being and doing and living. So, what are you going to write this book to be about? I think this is where you can get so authentic. It makes you smile, like it's making me smile right now thinking about what you're going to do. D is design your days. People think they need a new life, but usually they just need a new hour break in their day. Seriously. It's not about the back to like when people say, "Oh my gosh, I'm just back to back schedule, like no wiggle room." I'm like, "Girl, you're going to burn out just like I did." I'm going to tell you honestly, the crash is really really hard to pick yourself up from. Don't let yourself get to that point. Our lives aren't built in the big moments. They're really built in the ordinary ones. Because you can probably count your big moments on your hands, but the ordinary ones are thousands upon millions upon billions, right? I mean, what time do you wake up? How do you fuel your body? Do you move? Do you laugh? Do you spend time with people who energize you or drain you? Do you create more than you consume? Because your calendar tells the truth long before your dreams do. I mean, if I looked at your last 30 days, would I see evidence of the life you say you want? You can't put that on. You can't just say one day. You have to say day one and start being that life. That's not judgment. It's just fact and information. A is act before you're ready. I think this is a really hard one for most people. And can I let you in on a secret? I've almost never felt ready. I mean, not really ever. Not for TV, not for writing, not for competing, not for moving, not for launching businesses, not for starting over. I mean, readiness is one of the biggest myths we tell ourselves. Action creates readiness. You start moving, just like I said before, God doesn't steer a parked car. You got to be moving because that forward motion will propel you, not the other way around. The people you admire, they weren't fearless. They were just willing to move. T is trust the process. This one is hard because if you're like me, I love to plan and I like checklists and I like recipes, but life doesn't always work that way. And sometimes the detours become the destination, and those can be the most fun. I was going to say the funnest, but really the most fun. Sometimes the thing that you thought was your biggest setback becomes your greatest teacher. I never would have imagined that my struggles with menopause would become one of the most meaning conversations I've ever had with women, or that selling my home would open doors to experiences we couldn't have imagined. I mean, I only dreamed of being able to spend months in Europe, and now I'm living it. So you don't have to know the whole story. You just have to trust the author enough to write the next page. I is invest in yourself. Here's a truth that I wish every woman believed. Investing in yourself is not selfish. It's stewardship. No one thinks twice when we invest in our children's education or our homes or our careers, but when it comes to investing in our own growth, we hesitate. The books, the coach, the retreat, the gym membership, the trip, the therapy, the community. Why is that? Because somewhere along the way, we learn that everyone else comes first? I mean, imagine if we taught our daughters something different, that becoming the healthiest, strongest, wisest version of themselves is one of the greatest gifts that we can give the world. O is open the door. I mean, need I say more? You got to open the door. And if the door is closed, you got to break the window. Sometimes that's the most exciting thing. Because here's what I've learned: the life you're praying for rarely arrives when you're standing in the hallway. Open the door, break the window, take what is yours. It's not going to get handed to you. I'm telling you, life is just not waiting to hand you a cookie. Sometimes you got to bake that cookie and see what happens. And the last thing is N. Never stop becoming. I think that this is your sign. You hearing this today is your sign to rebuild your foundation. There's no finish line in life. There's just a moment that you decide you're going to start. It's not going to be perfect, and it's going to probably need a rewrite every once in a while, over and over, as long as you have breath in your lungs. Because reinvention, I mean, look at Madonna. She didn't do it once, she did it every era. It's just a choice. So, this is your invitation. You don't have to write your second chapter alone. And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with just this one final thought. A few years ago, if you had asked me where I'd be today, I don't think I could have imagined this chapter. Not because it's perfect by any means, far from it. Life is still very wonderfully messy. Not the Argentinian player Messi, by the way. There are still questions I don't have answers to. There are still days when I really doubt myself, still days when I wonder if I'm doing enough, still mornings when I catch myself slipping into old stories. But the difference is I don't live there anymore. I don't take residence there. Because once you realize you're holding the pen, you stop waiting for someone else to write the ending. One of the greatest gifts of getting older is perspective. They say don't look back, but I think you need to look back to look and propel yourself forward. You don't have to live there, you just have to reflect on it because there are probably a lot of things that you don't want to relive. And those are important life lessons. When you're 25, you think life is about proving yourself. When you're 35, you think it's about achieving. When you're 45, you start questioning everything. And somewhere along the way, if you're paying attention, you realize that life isn't about proving or performing or pleasing everyone else. Because if it is, it's a pretty miserable existence. I tried that one. Life is about becoming, not what the world expects you to be, but who God created you to be. And I truly believe we were each given gifts for a reason. And we were given gifts to share in community, not to bury and not to postpone, not to save for someday. Because your gifts are a gift to me, and my gifts are a gift to you. We're supposed to share those, we're supposed to complete each other. So, this program, Foundations, is not because you need another workbook, but because you need and deserve a place to pause and reflect and dream again, and to do it in community, and to ask better questions, and to get honest. We've spent almost a year planning my daughter's wedding, but when was the last time you sat down and just dedicated a few weeks to planning your life? Planning retirement and vacations and the next step in your career and your relationships. So, this is your invitation. Just one page, one conversation, one small, courageous step at a time. We're going to take this slowly. It's a 6-week program, and you're going to do some homework on your own. But here's something that I've learned after many years: transformation rarely happens in isolation, it happens in community. When someone looks at you and says, I know exactly how you feel, I've been there too. Keep going. Don't quit now. That's why I'm creating this, something I've wanted to do for a long time, my very first real community of women who are writing their second chapters together. It's going to be so cool. Women writing their second chapters together and probably going to be in each other's chapters because that's what this does. We're going to be stronger and wiser and healthier and more adventurous, more authentic. So if this sounds fun to you, and it should, make sure to follow this podcast because then you're going to get all the information. When you do that, you should also come to therealdish.com and sign up because that's going to be another trigger. And then you should probably also follow at The Real Dish and at Mareya Eats on Instagram and Facebook because then you'll get the third reminder. You belong. Okay, you belong here. You know, over the past year, I've been working on this roadmap, and I'm so excited for you to take this experience with me. Take this walk with me. Let me help guide you to what's helped me reframe my life and do it in community with other people. And the goal is to get that clarity that you've been seeking. So remember, the story isn't over. In fact, I think it's just getting really juicy. So come along with me.